So Corey and I are going to talk about the things that we've been doing together for the past couple months now from a partnership standpoint. But we're also going to be announcing one of the big things that we've been working on that is going to be a big announcement that we're going to be doing in a couple slides. So stay tuned for that. So if we could go back a slide. One of the things that I want to do is introduce and welcome Corey to the stage. So Corey, tell us a little bit about yourself and the perspective you'll be coming in for today.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So my name's Corey Sanders. I am the General Manager of Compute in the Azure team. So my responsibility in the Azure team is all of the infrastructure products, so virtual machines, but also a lot of our platform products, containers, and the platform services, and then of course the partnerships around that. I do have half of my team is the Linux team, and half of my team is the Windows team for that infrastructure platform. And this is for global Azure. So this is worldwide Azure support, of which of course government is a major part. One thing probably to start off with, I think as we sort of heard a little bit during the initial announcement, maybe to address the elephant in the room or the donkey in the room. I don't know, it's kind of a tough week for that. To address the elephant in the room, why is Microsoft on stage talking, one, with Red Hat, and two, about open source? It turns out I'm actually at the wrong conference, so no, just kidding. There's a few things that I'll say about that just to kind of kick off. One, I think open source, I've been sitting and listening and enjoying all the sessions so far, and all of the things that I heard this morning really resonate strongly with Microsoft when it comes to open source. First, I'll say just the ability to work with community, the ability to work back and give back solutions and technologies and grow together. That's a really important aspect for us. Some great examples. We've actually contributed all of .NET Core now to open source, and we're seeing a huge amount of growth in that platform thanks to the community there. And even one exciting stat, Microsoft is now #1 for contributors to open source projects on GitHub. So if you can believe that, that's a pretty exciting stat for us. And then I think the other thing, which perhaps is both good and maybe not necessarily what you want to hear about, but it's also really important for our business. And this is sort of a little bit where the rubber hits the road. We actually, on the Azure side, 60% of our new VMs that are being created are on Linux, and 1 out of every 3 VMs on Azure are now Linux as well. And so this is a core part of our business moving forward. And that's just, of course, the Azure side. Across development platform, data platform, so on. It's really a major part of our requirements moving forward. So anyway, that was a really long introduction. So now you know what I do and what I believe in.
Yeah, well, that's great, and that's what I think. Whether it is within the government or in industry, Microsoft, the whole thing with Open First. It's open source is one, and that is the engine that really drives innovation in the industry as well as in the government. So let's go over to the next slide. And what we want to do is, we've announced a partnership a couple months ago about all the different areas where we've been working. And what Corey and I are going to do is walk through each of these core components and phrase things in the context of what's in it for the government agencies and our partners and integrators out there that that want to work together with us. So let's just go through. We'll start off with the first one about Red Hat and Microsoft. So Microsoft has joined the Red Hat Cloud Service Provider Platform, certified CCSP, Certified Cloud and Service Provider Platform. So what are some of the benefits of wanting to join that for Microsoft, and what's in it for the government and customer?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, obviously, it enables cloud access, right? And so what you can do is you can take your subscriptions that you've gotten already for Red Hat Enterprise Linux, OpenShift, and so on, and be able to take those and deploy them into Azure directly. And so it offers a lot of that hybrid capability that we've seen a lot of customers get really excited over. No one is moving, whether government or industry outside, is moving completely wholesale into the cloud. We're seeing a ton of this hybrid approach, and so being able to move these capabilities around, especially with such a powerful product like Red Hat Enterprise Linux or OpenShift, is really, really great, and it enables that flexibility that we're seeing seeing everyone really demand. And so that's one of the aspects, is probably the biggest aspect of that program.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. You know, the whole thing with hybrid is so important, because the reality is that, you know, even though there's the mandate for cloud first and everything, you're not going to shut down your ERP system and just forklift everything into the cloud. I would say either it's going to be a very long time until everybody's in the cloud, and you're still probably going to have stuff on premise. So having that hybrid approach is really important. And what Cloud Access provides to you is that ability where you don't have to worry about guessing right in terms of how many subscriptions am I going to put in you know, on-premise versus a cloud. And so what people could do is use Cloud Access, get their subscriptions, put them on Azure, and as they become more and more successful in the public cloud, they can accelerate the adoption at their own rate without having to call anybody. They just go ahead and move those subscriptions. So that's cool.
Yeah, it's really exciting, and I think, you know, when you look at those offerings, of course, that's all of Red Hat's products being deployed on top of Azure. The sort of the second box here is sort of the fact that this was a bi-directional partnership. Right? So we also announced support for Windows to be supported on top of Red Hat OpenStack platform and the virtual Red Hat virtualization as well, and so you can now run Windows on top of those platforms in a fully supported way. So that bi-directional support, again, it comes back to that hybrid story. Really the only way to do sort of trusted hybrid is sort of the combination of these products.
Yeah, and that's I think, which goes into the third one, where we, you know, it has to be that bi-directional relationship where you don't want to call Red Hat and say, oh, I'm running a Windows guest, and then it's like, you know, people hang up and, you know, think it's a crank call or something. Or, you know, the other way, if people call in for Azure support and want Red Hat support, that is also really important. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the support relationship that we have?
Yeah, I would never hang up if you called me, Dave. No, so from a support relationship perspective, I mean, one of the coolest things that we do, and it's a very unique thing that we've done together with Red Hat. It's the only partner we actually do this with. Is we actually have Red Hat engineers sitting inside our campus. So they're sitting inside Redmond's office, Microsoft offices, to be able to handle support engagement. And this is so important. I mean, it's not just a question of great. So, you know, they're a nudge away versus a phone call away, but it's also, it breeds a lot of engagement, a lot of, again, community even within our teams of, hey, we better make sure that this works great. We better make sure that we're addressing these issues, because the guy who's taking these calls is right next door to the guy who's taking the calls from our side, right? And so there's an aspect of making sure that the overall products are just going to really sing together, because we do have that level of engagement between the two companies.
Yeah, and then that takes us into the fourth part, where, you know, we were talking, you know, so it's one part to just like, yeah, we'll agree to answer each other's calls if there's an integration thing, but we're actually working very closely when it comes to open hybrid clouds, when it comes to technologies like CloudForm. So do you want to tell us a little bit about those efforts that we're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, for those who use CloudForm, this is an awesome product for sort of multi-cloud management and hybrid management. You know, certainly recognize and expect this to be a multi-cloud world. I think, again, one of the benefits and sort of requirements of open source is that I make sure that my product's the very best to run these solutions, and make sure that you choose us as your cloud provider because it's the best platform for you to run on, not because you feel like you have to. And some of the capabilities that CloudForms brings makes that really easy, right? Makes it really easy for you to go find the best place to deploy, find the best platform, and be able to manage all of it with that single pane. Right, and so it plays into that hybrid story, but it also gives that multi-cloud story. I'm not going to mention any of the other clouds by name. There are a few out there, but Azure's the only one you really want to use. No, just kidding.
We love them all.
Yeah, that's right. You have to say that.
No, but I think the other part of it, and we could talk about one of the things with CloudForms too, is that with CloudForms being open source, it wasn't. So the upstream project for that is ManageIQ. And it wasn't that Red Hat had to employ the engineers to get CloudForms to be working with Azure. Microsoft actually wrote the connector for Azure for ManageIQ. We jointly took it and hardened it and put it into the commercially supported product too. So that is, again, that part of the GitHub commits that you guys are doing is working into ManageIQ.
Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely right. And the other thing I'd probably add to that is I saw the session this morning on Ansible. There's also been a lot of work to make sure Ansible runs awesome on top of the VMs in Azure as well, which of course is all tied into the CloudForms management story. So yeah, absolutely. The integrating back and putting that code back in to make that support great is a big part of our principle.
Yeah, and one of the other things I think about too, whenever you have a hybrid cloud, the big benefit that you get is the elasticity to burst into the cloud. And one of the people ask, oh well, who's running Red Hat products on top of Azure? And we had the DevNation Federal event back in July of this year, where we were on stage with Microsoft and Red Hat, and we had Noah come up. And one of the things that Noah is using is they're running RHEL on top of Azure. They're using Ansible to be able to do high performance computing, to be able to burst workloads out onto Azure. And one of their big value propositions for that is that, if you think about an organization like Noah, there are the things that they're trying to do every day, and it's very predictable projects that they're working on, but there are also crises and emergencies where you need to be able to burst from a compute standpoint. And so, one of the things whenever I talk with CIOs, part of it is that, there's this, they want to have 100% utilization of every dollar that they invested. If they do that, that means they had zero elasticity, right? So, but if you're able to take advantage of the cloud, you can max out what's going on on-prem, but also be able to go out into the public cloud to be able to do those bursty workloads. So, what are some other elasticity benefits and all that you can get by having that hybrid model?
Yeah, it turns out this is actually even broader outside of government. Probably the biggest usage case or sort of rationale for using the cloud, or at least starting in the cloud, which is that agility. I think there's certainly a cost aspect to it. There's certainly a, how am I going to do the same thing I'm doing today but for less? But there's even more excitement and energy around the opportunities for innovation. The fact that, hey, previously you had to say no to a project because you didn't have the hardware available, right? It wasn't easy for you to go acquire that. It was hard to get it set up and configured. Now there's certain aspect of, the cloud enables you to say yes to everything, give everything a try. And even if 1 out of 10 things work, you're still not paying the cost of having to fund that for 2, 3, 4 years. You gave it a shot, it didn't work, you kill 9 of them, you get that one nugget, great, right? That's a whole new project, a whole new way for you to go, improve your customer's experience and so on. And so I think we're seeing that across the board, all industries, that's really driving it. And the cloud, of course, is the beginning, as I think we'll talk about here a little bit in the next slide, and sorry to steal the thunder a little bit, containers takes it even further, right? And I think that we're seeing, containers plus cloud are adding an additional level of agility that is really enabling incredibly fast deployments and solutions and time to market, which is important in any industry, no matter what you're doing. Getting that solution out, trying it, and failing fast or succeeding fast is really, really important, and that's what we're seeing out there pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, and I think, to build upon that, I think that the elasticity that the cloud gives you, it lowers the cost of failure.
Yes.
Right? Where it's like you could do those 10 things, 9 of them fail, that's okay. But if you get that $1 billion idea, it pays for that and more.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it turns out marketing, lowering the cost of failure is not as good of a marketing pitch, but it's exactly right. I mean, that actually is really the right way to think about it, but probably just don't quote me on that one.
Yeah. But also it creates that culture, right? From a culture standpoint, where it's okay to, it's like if you don't get up to, you got to have the at-bats if you're going to hit the home run.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
Yeah, so let's look at the last bullet here too, where it's like if somebody would have told me I'd be on stage with Microsoft talking about .NET and SQL Server running on top of RHEL, I would have thought it was like a prank caller. But let's talk about that a little bit. And so what are we doing there?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really exciting aspect of the partnership, and perhaps I think when we originally started working with Red Hat, probably one of the most interesting parts of the conversation was how do we get .NET, which back in those early days we knew we were planning to open source, and of course back then we did not have the SQL plan, but we've since now made SQL available on top of Linux in preview, and it's just such a great opportunity to sort of do this. I think you call it lasagna. I call it parfait. I like parfaits better than lasagna. But there's this layering opportunity that's just really great, right? You can get sort of at the top, you can sort of develop to the .NET platform or the SQL platform. Then you could imagine layering that on top of Linux, on top of RHEL, as sort of the next layer down, perhaps that on top of Azure, and then all of it managed by CloudForms. And suddenly you've got really sort of the best in breed, top to bottom of the stack, and all enabled with sort of open source technologies and solutions. So it's a really exciting part of the partnership. I think it's one of the things we're seeing the most uptake is those capabilities with .NET and SQL on top of RHEL.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go to the next slide and let's have the big reveal of what we're going to announce. As Paul said early today, that there are 3 public cloud providers that are FedRAMP High, and Azure is one of them. But still, whenever you take a workload and you want to put it onto a FedRAMP certified cloud, you need to do the accreditation of that application that lives on top of that. So the benefit of doing it on a FedRAMP cloud is that you could refer back to the cloud provider in terms of, all the security controls are handled and everything. But one of the things that we've been working on over the past couple of weeks is there is a thing called Azure Playbooks, or Azure Blueprints, which are security controls that help you do accreditation of applications to get them running on Azure very, very quickly. And one of the things that we've been doing is, we have the link on GitHub there, is an open source project that Red Hat and Microsoft are working on to get OpenShift to be accredited as fast as possible on top of Azure. And the really nice thing about OpenShift and with Cloud Access is that not only can you run OpenShift on top of Azure Public, but also in Azure Government as well. Mm-hmm. But tell us a little bit about some of the, why do you want to think about security accreditation and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this whole proposal and I think the approach with OpenShift on top of Azure, sort of like I mentioned, being able to get your applications out and built and deployed and updated in a very agile way, we're seeing this demand across the board. And so, the combination of the Azure infrastructure and the scale offered there, coupled with container support on top of OpenShift, it enables a really nice platform to be able to bring these things together. But as Dave mentioned, sometimes it can be hard to go put all these pieces together and say, well, now what do? I know this part's got this attestation and compliance level, and this part. So where am I, right? Am I okay to deploy this? And the goal with this and what we're releasing here is the ability to sort of put your mind at ease with that, right? And make it really easy to get to a place where you can deploy these great platforms together and know that you're deploying it in the way you want it to with the compliance you expect.
Okay. Yeah, and we're going to be closing out in a second, but one of the signature things that I like to do when I do panels and things like that is I ask my fireside chat partner to, if people were going to tweet one thing you said today, what would that be? But you think about that for a minute, okay. and you could play the Jeopardy music now.
It's a challenge.
Yeah, but one of the things that, as he thinks about that, the thing to really think about, one of the monikers for Red Hat that we talk about is tried, tested, trusted. I think that people trust Red Hat. They trust Microsoft for their most mission-critical workloads, and I think the combination of us working together is just really, really exciting. So as we close out, if people were going to tweet one thing you said today, Corey, what would that be?
Okay, here I'm gonna try this. See, I think Azure and then the plus sign to save characters. Azure plus Red Hat Gov. And I could say equals love. It's good, but that's good. But there's so many characters left. If we've learned anything from our presidential candidates, they know how to take advantage of the characters. Azure plus, let's say Red Hat Gov, deploying trusted open source like walking on a cloud. I'm not going to drop the mics. It's not my mic. And that still leaves some room for emojis, so you could still put like cats dancing or whatever you want to.
Or heart or something. Yeah.
I tweet a lot, apparently.
Okay, well, with that, Corey, I want to thank you guys. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Microsoft, for being a diamond sponsor of ours. And I'll turn it back to the rest of the program. Thank you all for coming. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you so much.